another episode of the EQ Lunch and Learn. My name is Mucha Mlingo, and I am your host for this awesome conversation that we are going to be having this month. I am particularly delighted as we join in the celebrations for International Women's Day and take a stab at unpacking the theme for this year, which is Give to Gain. And as always, we are linking this to our underlying competency of emotional intelligence. In many professional spaces, women are encouraged to give generously their time, their expertise, emotional labor, and support. Yet far less attention is paid to the other side of the equation, receiving. And I'd like to imagine the same is for men as well. In this episode of the EQ Lunch and Learn, we will explore reciprocity, an emotional intelligence practice that strengthens influence, protects well being, and enables sustainable impact at work. We're not talking about keeping score, we're talking about creating balance, life giving professional relationships. So, in this session, we're going to talk a little bit about how reciprocity shows up at work. I had to practice that word several times to make sure that I don't trip over it. We will be talking about why many professionals struggle to receive and how to practice reciprocity with intention. As we mark International Women's Day this month, this conversation invites a shift away from over-functioning and resilience towards mutual support, shared growth, and sustainable success. When reciprocity is present, individuals thrive and workplaces become stronger. As always, I am not alone. I have three amazing panelists who are going to help to unpack this conversation. So, without further ado, let me bring our panelists on. I'm going to bring on first Ayoti. Ayoti, um, it's great to have you here. Ayoti Bukashi Tande is a seasoned human resources leader with extensive expertise across multiple industries. She is currently leading the people and culture agenda at FAR, and she has held senior leadership roles at large organizations like WPP Scan Group, GlaxoSmithKline, Schneider Electric, and Nestle, spearheading initiatives in business transformation, post-acquisition integration, and organizational effectiveness. What's most important to us is she's known for her strong belief in the untapped potential of people when supported by the right environment. She's deeply committed to mentorship, coaching, and building systems that enable people to thrive. Ayoti, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Mucha. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. If you'd like to connect with Ayoti, you are welcome to connect with her on her LinkedIn. We are sharing a link to her LinkedIn page so you can connect with her even as you learn more about her. Next in the room, we have Michelle Kimani, who is not a stranger to the Lunch and Learn platform. She has been with us before. She is an early career strategy and working at the intersection of systems, scale, and delivery. She currently works at Food for Education as internal consultant, where she supports cross-functional projects focused on strengthening how organizations operate as they grow. Her work sits in the space between ideas and execution with a focus on how teams access and use knowledge and how organizations access and structure their system needs. She is particularly interested in how systems hold under real world pressure and how organizations can move from reactive problem solving to a more intentional and sustainable way of working. As she continues to grow in her career, she's also becoming more intentional about the kind of professional she wants to be. And this includes not only the work she delivers, but how she shows up within teams and relationships. She is increasingly thoughtful about balance in how she contributes and where she seeks support, and recognizing that sustainable growth comes from both giving and receiving, not just one or the other. If you'd like to connect with Michelle, you can find her on LinkedIn as well. Michelle, it's great to have you here today. Thank you for joining us again.
Thank you. It's great to be back. Excited to talk about this topic today. But yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much, Michelle. And last but not least, we have the gentleman in the house. Normally, they say when it's one woman with the men, they say the roses amongst the thorns. I don't know what the saying is for men. But Barnabas, we are happy to have you here with us. Barnabas is a certified life coach specializing in marriage and relationship coaching with over 500 hours of experience helping couples achieve healthier, more fulfilling relationships through his co founded coaching practice, Two Ships Solutions. With a strong foundation as a certified behaviors, motivators, and EQ analyst, and a safe conversations leader, he has supported individuals and organizations in building emotional awareness, communication, and resolving conflict. Driven by a mission to bring healing and transformation, he is passionate about mentorship, particularly through initiatives like Men of Purpose, and he currently serves as the lead pastor of Abundant Life Community Church in Kilimani, bringing together coaching insights, spiritual leadership, and a deep commitment to personal growth and relational well-being. Barnabas, it is such an honor to have you here with us today. Thank you very much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Mucha. Thanks for inviting me and being part of this wonderful, wonderful panel.
Fantastic. I tell you, every single being a phenomenal panel to unpack the conversation. Barnabas, since I brought you on last, let me start with you as we dive into our conversation. This year's International Women's Day theme invites us to think about give to gain. When you think about this phrase, when you hear that in the context of your work, what does that mean to you? And where do you see this idea of giving and gaining working well or breaking down in professional spaces today? So for our opening question, I'm going to ask you all the same thing. And the idea is just to give your take on what give to gain means and, where you've seen it work well and where perhaps it's not working so well. So Barnabas, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think for me, it means being in a healthy relationships in the workspace where we are drawing from each other. I like what he said earlier. Give to gain is not about keeping the score, but neither is it also about just seeing what you can gain from the other person without you giving. It's not transactional. It's a healthy relationship where we are realizing the need to both give, but also to receive. I think it's important because sometimes there are those who are many times operate from a space of just giving. And there are those who are always on the other side of only wanting to receive. But I think the two go together. So it's like a balance. It's like a seesaw where we have to balance the two sides, where there's giving and gaining. And if that is happening in a workspace, then it can be very, very healthy for the organization. It helps in terms of mentorship because mentorship is all about giving. But also it helps a lot. I'm a great team player, so it also helps a lot in working as a team, because in a team then there's what am I bringing into this team, but also what do I gain from this team, and so together what am I contributing and what support can I get from the team so that we can work together and leverage on each other's strengths, and as such then we are the better when we can be able to give but also gain at the same time.
I love that. And I like that reference you've made to being part of a team, Barnabas, because I think when we do give to gain well, then it means that we have that, that mathematical equation that makes no sense, where 1 + 1 is actually greater than 2, because we're all pulling our weight. So thank you very much for that. Ayosi, let me come to you, just interested in the same thing. What's your perspective on this idea of give to gain? And maybe have you seen it working well, breaking down in professional spaces today?
Yeah, thank you, Mucha. And just building on what Barnabas has said, I think for me there is an intentionality here. because we are trying to strike a position where not one is greater than the other, but where we are saying we have to create a balanced environment where both are valued. Both the giving and the receiving are indeed valued. Because a lot more, we do a lot of giving unconsciously, not remembering that we have to refresh, and so we have to also receive, right? Because you cannot give out of an empty vessel. So you have to have something, you have to be refreshed. So we have to be deliberate about that. And if I can just bring in my perspective in terms of what I've been doing in the last almost 3 decades working as a HR professional, it's very automatic that, especially when you see leaders getting into the position of leadership, there's an expectation that they need to start giving, because at the end of the day, that is what they are known for, because they are good for something. But what it means for me as a leader is actually to really, how then do we create an enabling environment, a culture where we have to build, especially the element around trust and psychological safety, so that people can feel safe to actually give and at the same time also receive ideas. So that is very, very critical. So an area where there is the right sort of culture, if we have to also provide the systems so that we make sure that they're designed well enough for that element of feedback to actually be sufficient. That is extremely important. The last point I will talk about in terms of this area of giving and also receiving is basically the leadership expectation. Are we able to model the ability to listen so that we can also be able to receive from the teams that we are leading? And where I have seen it working well is where there is an element of two-way feedback being encouraged, and where I have seen leaders who are vulnerable enough to actually share power and invite ownership and invite people to actually speak into their spaces as well. Now, a lot of times we do find in today's workplace, there's different generational, the different demographics. And the voice is equally important as the contribution. And when I'm talking about recognizing both contribution and voice is equally important, because this is where the talent, the people who we are working with, want to be able to also be part of the system, to be able to shape what was going on around at the workplace, being able to collaborate in the different areas that they are actually called to work in. Now, there's one area you talked about, where is it breaking down? Where are the systems breaking down? This is in areas where you find that there is more giving than the receiving, where you really are not refreshing yourself. There's areas of burnout that start to check in, and where also hierarchy starts to play up. When hierarchy starts to play up in organizations where there is hierarchy, and there's a lot of fear in terms of where leadership cannot be challenged, ideas cannot be freely given, feedback is not as amiable as it should be, where it is limiting, then you start to see the systems breaking down.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I love that. I love that. Thank you very much for sharing. Before I come to you, Michelle, on the same question and your take, Emmanuel Nandoka, it's great to have you online. I can see Emmanuel says, very solid principle. He likes the idea of sowing to reap. If you are with us online, please say hi so that we can say hi back. We love to have an interactive session. And at some point, we're going to be asking you if you have any questions for our panel. But for now, just say hi and tell us where you are joining us from, whether you are on LinkedIn or you are on YouTube. So, Michelle, let me come to you. Same question. What's this idea of give to gain? What does it mean to you? And especially as an early career professional, how do you manage the receipt? Well, let me not go too deep. For now, let's just talk about the give to gain. I know we'll come a little deeper into, especially managing the receive parts. But, talk about what give to gain means to you.
To me, I think GiveToGain represents vulnerability. And I'll kind of do a little story about when I first joined the workforce. When I first joined the workforce, I felt, oh my God, thank God I got this job. I need to prove myself. I need to give. I'll do the extra project. I'll speak to the client. I'll be on this proposal. I just want to show myself and really show that I'm capable, and they did the right thing picking me for this role. And what you start to realize is you start to burn out, or you're juggling so many things. And with what I like to now call youth naivety, that you think you can handle it all, things start to drop. And it starts to come where you actually need to be vulnerable, like, actually, I don't have it all, and I need help. and I need us to work together. And to me, give to gain is almost being very comfortable, even as you're starting out, and being very transparent that I want to support as much as I can, but I'm also transparent that these are the areas where I'm lacking, right? And that way it helps either your manager, it helps your teammates know where to support you, helps your managers know where to plug in. So to me, give to gain is one, we're all contributing to the same shared purpose, but at the same time, I'm being vulnerable enough that you're also aware of where I'm lacking. You can feed into the areas where I'm growing. I think now where I am in my career as an internal consultant, people tend to think you have the solutions to everything, but sometimes actually coming into the room and being like, you know what, guys, I'm just as lost as you. Let's try figure this out together. And now we're both committed. No one feels like this person has the answer, this person doesn't. And I've found that it really helps create trust within teams. It helps, like, your relationship with your manager becomes so much different because it doesn't feel like they're just directing you, but at the same time they really know how to invest in you. So to me, that's what it means.
Wow, fantastic. We've only just done one question and already there's so many insights that are loading. And I really like the point you made around vulnerability. And I think, Ayotu, you spoke to this as well, that this is really critical as we look to doing this give to gain. So let's continue our conversation. And as you're listening in, please tell us in the comments, whether it's on YouTube or LinkedIn, tell us what give to gain means to you in your context of your work. What is give to gain? Michelle, let me stay with you and ask, because you brought up this idea of, early on having this naivete and saying, I want to prove myself. And so you're working and you're working and you're working and you find yourself at this place of burnout. So how do you experience this? Tell us more. And you started sharing a little bit, but tell us more about how you experience this reciprocity at work, especially when it comes to asking for support, visibility, or opportunities. So asking for what you want. What does that look like for you? And what are some of the experiences you've had? And maybe you could even share if you've had leaders who've been good at doing this for you
Yeah.
in your working career so far.
I remember the first time I experienced burnout. I think I was on 4 projects at the same time, different clients, a lot of different deliverables. And I finally was honest with my manager and saying, I think I'm thinking I'm getting to that point. And he said, you are already a good worker. No one is not going to believe you when you say you need a day off. Like, we believe you. Like, it's okay. We understand. You can take the time, etc. So what I started realizing is that I don't always have to constantly be in this battle of proving. When your work speaks for yourself and you're able to be honest with your manager, they're able to come back and be like, you know what, it's okay. And so when my manager said that, I was like, oh, I can actually say I'm not doing okay, please help. And it's not going to be seen as like underperformance, because in reality no manager wants to have their team lagging behind and not intercept early and actually find out when the project is going down. So I think I've been really blessed to have managers who've been understanding, really blessed to have managers who've told me to take time off, who've kind of repositioned things. But I also think, as much as they have been leaders who've been supportive, I think growing into your own and getting comfortable and being like, you know what, I'm now comfortable saying it and not seeing it as undermining to me. And also just letting your work speak for yourself. I think sometimes when you're starting early on, you feel like you have to go above and beyond. I'd say always seek feedback, keep understanding, where you're doing well, where you're doing wrong. So you're not living in this constant state of anxiety. Because sometimes we tend to make up stories in our head. No one actually realizes what's going wrong.
For sure. Believe you me, to the young people who are listening to this now, and if you watch this later, I can assure you that it doesn't stop. That idea of that voice sometimes telling you that, you have to prove yourself. It's something that we carry for very long. And I think it's something that women struggle with a lot. This voice that can, cause you to undermine and underappreciate the value that you bring. So I really love that, just learning to trust yourself and learning to trust your work. And I think, you mentioned something that's really important, this idea of the leader part of it, because you also then need to be working with a leader who is, has the leadership capabilities, that understands this idea of the reciprocity, right? That it is give to gain, that it is give and take, right? That you're giving, but you're also receiving. Ayoti, I want to come to you because this give to gain sounds powerful in theory, but in many organizations, the giving is clear, but the gaining is less so. So if we're going to create the kind of environment that Michelle says she's blessed to have experienced, where she's had leaders where they can have those open conversations, from an HR perspective, how have you seen this lack of reciprocity showing up in organization, and what impact does it have on engagement, on performance, and culture? When you think of the converse of what Michelle's described.
Loaded. Loaded indeed. And I just want, I want to build on something, Michelle, you said, where you kind of struggled with saying, look, it's enough. I need some time out. Like, I need to go back and refresh. And this is where, as leaders, we are called upon to be able to read the room, read what is not being said. And I think that is where it kind of starts to tip, where you're focused on the total well-being of your teams, the teams that you lead. Because the reality is, it's not everyone who shows up the same way. And there are those who go and go and go. They don't know when to stop, especially if you're dealing with alpha males and alpha females, choleric type of people who do not know when to say it's enough, right? And I know if there's anybody who's going to be watching this who knows me personally, they're like, how dare you speak? And yet you're one of those people. I don't have the right to say it. I can theoretically explain it, and I know physically it does work, because I've had to get to a place of where I have learned to call myself to the same meeting when I don't have a leader to do that. I've had over time to actually start to call myself into that meeting, because I've been through burnout twice, right? And so at some point, I used to think burnout was this cliche word that people just say to like to look nice and to like to look like they're overachievers. No, it's actually a real thing. At one time, I was hospitalized for 6 days. So it's a real thing, right? And so the ability of getting to know, even for yourself, where you say it is enough, I've had to grow over time to get there. So coming back to your question, Mucha, where you're saying, what is it? How does it show up? So one of the things is that where leaders miss those subtle cues where, even just from body language, an employee who's slouching, an employee who's just like staring into the oblivion, even the tone, the energy, and just stop for a minute and check in. Are you okay? Is everything okay? How can I be of support to you? So just that ability to read the whole space, it's extremely important. And now it's actually even more alarming for me, where we are having a lot of hybrid working, and so a lot of online calls. I've been one leader, I keep on insisting, put on your videos. I'm not asking for you to put on your videos because of anything. I know I'm a social person, so I like to connect with people, and I keep on saying I don't want to talk to the avatars. However, the reason I ask for that is just to be able to read and see, are you okay? Just to check in, right? And you can even tell from the tone of the voice, the intonation, you can be able to know that. The other thing that really is a bit worrisome is where you're working in a space, in a culture where leaders appreciate and recognize the people who keep on stretching themselves, going beyond their call of duty, working late in the night, working weekends, and without actually some form of recognition, some photos, some sort of appreciation. So that is quite alarming. Now, the last one I'll just mention, because there are many areas I could actually touch on. I just mentioned one that is actually quite deep for me, and it's deep because and this one I'm going to lean in heavily on AI, emotional intelligence, where EQ rather, where we lead different personalities. And it's important to be able to study. So when I'm saying read the room, the way I'll manage Michelle might be very different in how I will relate to Barnabas, depending on the personality types. So when you're working with personalities, people who are cholerics, they work very differently with people who are phlegmatics or melancholies, because they want their space. They want, they're introverted in nature. And it doesn't mean because they're not voicing out that they're not performing. So it's just important to understand and look at the different personalities. Now, if I can quickly just link this in terms of the engagement, performance, and culture, because that's a lot in there. It's I'll just say this around engagement. A lot of time, talent who do not feel like they are being seen, they are heard, or they're being valued, they will take a dip in terms of how they show up. And that's why I'm just going to link this to the personality traits. So the leader's ability to appreciate and bifurcate that we connect with individuals differently, it's extremely important. I might have my leadership style, but the understanding of trying to unpack and trying to unlock the different individuals and meeting them at their points of need is extremely important. And so that is where engagement starts to decline, because the talent starts to feel misunderstood and they feel like, you know what, we are not connecting. There is a disconnect in terms of this relationship, because the workplace is truly a relationship. And I'm glad we have a relationship coach, Barnabas Achoki. I will find you after this call and tell you where we once almost connected. It's very powerful. Relationships are extremely important. They are a lifetime, they are actually a long-term runway, and it's not a one start and stop. And because when you're in the workplace, it's extremely important to watch out for that engagement. When it comes to performance, we need to recognize that performance is not transactional, because we are required as leaders to actually be able to adapt and actually be able to appreciate what is happening within the teams. And so when you start seeing declining performance, then you need to be able to recognize what is happening around that space. You cannot be able to know that if you do not really know the team that you're working with.
People.
Yes. So, and the performance does not happen always because of, we always assume that the people do not have the capabilities. That's not necessarily it. There could be something else that's going on that is more beyond, that is deeper. The ability to ask the right questions, the ability to appreciate what is happening behind this individual, because there are many facets to life. And yes, I know we spend most of our time at the workplace, but there is another thing going on with this individual. There is the family space, there could be the spiritual space, there could be whatever it is that is going on, the total well-being of this individual, and that kind of 8 wheels of life. So by the time you unpack all these areas, and you cannot get through this place as a leader if you do not know how to engage and how to connect and have that relationship brewing. So on the last one around culture, it's a very, I'm actually pausing for a minute because I'm trying to see how to bring this out without seemingly, okay, let me just say it. So the reality is the culture really starts to translate into the leadership way, the leaders in terms of how they lead. Because a lot of times they say the leaders do define the culture of the workplace. And you will find cultures which are weakened over time is because of low trust, psychological safety.
Yeah, 100%.
If Michelle, Ayoti,
100%.
Barnabas, Mucha is not able to be their true self at work, and they're not able to show up the way they are authentically, then it starts to shift what's happening around that space. And so we need to be able to appreciate that leadership styles and how leaders do show up in this space actually do define, it's actually a big defining moment. And so I just want to underpin the culture part to trust. And I know trust is not the only factor, but it is a big factor. And where there is no trust, I will actually mask up when I'm coming to work and when I'm showing up. And so you will not get the best out of me because it is transactional and I'm doing the bare minimum just to get my paycheck, to take care of my bills, and I move on. And so when it comes to impact, when it comes to meaningful work, there is a disconnect. And so what happens is it starts to show up in many ways where the talent start feels unappreciated, they start feel that they're not being recognized, they start feel that they're not being paid enough, because for them, it's not about the impact, it's not about the meaningful work, it's about the transaction. I've done my 8 hours, I've done my 40 hours in a week, I've done my month, pay me my salary, and I move on. Right.
Yeah, 100%. Oh my goodness, so much insights there. And before I come to you, Barnabas, I think I was lost for a minute there. Before I come to you, Barnabas, I just want to touch on something that you said, Ayoti, that was leaders are, you know, I'm sure you'll agree with me. People are promoting capabilities, but very few are, you know, equipped with the skills necessary to do leadership, which is a whole different thing to what your technical capabilities are. And this idea of investing the time in getting to know Barnabas, let me come to you. Oh my goodness, my network is fighting me today.
Yeah.
Barnabas, let me
Yes.
come to you. I want to just talk to you. One of the things that Ayoti said was this idea that relationships are critical in and in the workplace. When it becomes transactional, it impacts how we work. It impacts engagement. It impacts performance, and it definitely has an impact on culture. So, what are some of the signs if that someone is in a relationship dynamic where they are giving more than they are gaining? And we're not trying to keep score. We've said this from the start that give to gain reciprocity is not about keeping score, but at the same time we need to be in relationships that are mutually beneficial. So what are some of the things I need to be paying attention to as an individual? And you can speak to this, Barnabas, both from a personal perspective and also in the workplace.
Thank you so much. And Ayoti, that was loaded. A lot of things are coming in there. And I like what you said. So leadership is not just about doing, also it's also being. And so just that being and just being aware of what is happening is very, very, very important. But some of the signs that somebody is in a relationship where they are, you know, some of the signs that they're not in a good space is many times they feel drained. They feel constantly complaining. You can even see their giving is not coming from a good space. The giving is coming from a place a place of I have to, as opposed to I really want to give into this relationship. The attitude is I mean, can tell. And I think, like Ayoti said, it leads to burnout and different personalities. Now, I'm a phlegmatic, and one of the weaknesses of this personality is that saying no is very difficult. So, you know, you keep going, and you're being drained, you know, and you're suffering. And then by the time you're coming to this realization, you're burnt out. And so it leads to a burnout, and a burnout then means you're not as excited as you were before in showing up at work. In your relationships, you feel that you're the one who is constantly making the relationship work. You feel that you make excuses when you find that you're making excuses for the other person. You know, and I see this a lot, even in romantic relationships. People are dating, and you can already see a red flag here, but the other person is just constantly making excuses for the other person, and so you can see that they are giving and not gaining a lot in that relationship. And I like what you're saying. It has to be mutual. There has to be that reciprocity in every relationship. And so when you find yourself in a relationship that you're always feeling that you're ending up with the wrong end of the stick, then definitely that's not a right relationship. Something is wrong with that relationship. It should be a relationship that is refreshing. It should be a relationship that you feel that you're also gaining as much as you're also giving. I think that's what a relationship is all about. I am gaining and I'm giving, because when that is not there, it's not a relationship. It's something else. I don't know what you can call it, but it's not. It's something else. But when it's a relationship, there's a give and take. And so there's a giving and there's a taking, there's a receiving and giving. And that's how it flows. You know, somebody, my mentor coach, some time back told me something very, very important, that a relationship has to breathe. And the breathing is the giving and the receiving. That's the breathing. It's the giving and the receiving. So it's always a going out and coming in, just as we do our normal breathing. And so when you find that you're always just inhaling and there's no exhaling, then there is a problem. You can suffocate. And many people do suffocate in such kind of relationships. And so I think we have to be very, very careful that the relationship there is both the gaining and the giving. I know some people like being in relationships where they're only gaining, and these are guys who just want to be in a space, even in a work environment. They always want to be supported. They always want somebody else the rest of the team to carry the weight, and they are hardly giving in and putting in their weight behind it. And so it has to be both for it to be healthy. both in and for us to be productive, both at professional level, but also at a personal level. I think one of the things that I think is Michelle who said it, and Mucha, you alluded to that. I know, especially in male-dominated areas, so often ladies want to overstretch themselves, just to prove that what a man can do, a woman can do better. And in so doing, they may overstretch in giving and trying to prove, as Michelle said earlier, and that just leads to a burnout, a fatigue, and when you're burnt out, when you're emotionally drained, there's emotional draining. When you're emotionally drained, your output also is greatly affected.
Is impacted. Yeah, yeah. I love that. I really like what you said. What you said, your mentor coach told you. A relationship has to breathe. So in the giving and receiving, that's the breathing. So if you are only exhaling, you will suffocate. You will pass out.
Yep.
And I think that's such an important point to underscore here. That and this is the same both in our personal relationships, so in our romantic relationships, in our relationships parent to child, in our relationship child to parent, but also in our relationships in the workplace. If you're constantly giving, you will suffocate. I think that's such an important point. Thank you very much for highlighting that. And it really emphasizes this idea that it then must be a give and take. Barnabas, let me stay with you as we continue with our questions. And I want to ask you all this same question. So if GiveToGain is the ideal, so if the ideal is this breathing, in and out, right? What gets in the way? Why is it that so many of us don't have that balance? We talked about, Barnabas, you just mentioned the fact that when we're not in that reciprocate, when that relationship is not one where we reciprocate, then one suffers. You talked about the burnout, you talked about the emotional exhaustion. I know another impact of giving without receiving is bitterness, because you feel as though, oh my gosh, I'm always the one giving in this relationship, and that can breed bitterness, which is also harmful to us both mentally, emotionally, and physically as well. So what gets in the way of that balance? Why do you think so many professionals, and we've talked about it already, will underscore it, especially women? It would be nice to hear your take on this. Find it easier to give than receive. What are some of the beliefs, the patterns, the experiences that cause that to be the case?
Thank you. Yeah, that's a very important question. And let me begin by what you just mentioned about women. I guess naturally, because of the nurturing aspect of women, then and this I'll also bring in later on about leadership. So the nurturing nature of women then makes them always want to give. You're constantly caring, constantly wanting to see and make sure that everybody is okay, everything is fine. So there's always unconsciously, without even realizing, you're constantly on the giving mode, and hardly stop to even ask for support. And I think the same thing, I think Zayoti talked about leadership. We tend to think that as a leader, I must know everything. And so even where I'm struggling, where I am, not sure of what's happening, or, even where sometimes I need to ask for support in different ways, I find myself straining. I find myself pushing myself. Again, a lot of these things has a lot of comes from our belief systems. So that's why self-awareness is very, very key. And constantly asking yourself, why am I always giving? I like what Michelle said, that was a powerful example of just being self-aware that, I'm trying to prove myself. I'm in this new job. I want to prove myself. So wanting to prove yourself, whether you're new in the work, in the organization, as I said earlier, if you're a lady in a male-dominated environment, you want to prove yourself. If you sometimes, based on our own insecurities, when I feel that these people are more qualified in one way or another than I am, then I may be wanting to, or I'm not sure of myself, that I'm wanting to prove myself. And in wanting to prove myself, I find myself giving more than is necessary. And so having that self-awareness is very, very key. Coming back to asking ourselves, why do I always want to give? What is driving me? But secondly, also is when do I when am I always giving? When do I give? Not just why, but when do I give? When do I find myself giving more? It could be just those seasons in your life that you're feeling, are sort of somehow not sure of yourself. Other things are happening in your life, and so there's just one place that you feel my giving, quote unquote, it's kind of like noticed, and so you find yourself then now burying yourself and giving yourself 100% in that area, whereas other aspects of your life are not working. And I've seen that a lot with men. When things are not happening in our personal spaces, then we dive in fully into that one thing that we know we can prove ourselves in, and that could be our job. And so we find ourselves giving ourselves even more than is necessary. I think also, and I think it's Michelle who mentioned vulnerability, coming to a space where I accept the fact that, yes, I need others to contribute to me as well. And so that I can be vulnerable enough to ask for that support. I think sometimes, even just going by the word vulnerability, in fact, the word vulnerable comes from a Latin word meaning to be wounded, or it's kind of like a sign of a weakness. In fact, when we talk about the vulnerable in the society, it looks like a weakness. And so often we don't want to look like we are weak. And so there's this belief that if I ask for that support, then I'm acting needy, and nobody wants to be needy. Yet sometimes we need help. There's something we need in our lives that then we can ask for that need, and instead of killing ourselves by giving when we could have asked for the support that we needed, and we could have gained that support.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much for sharing. I really liked what you said about, the when part. I think that's something that we overlook, right? So having, and really it comes down to that self-awareness. And I think one of the reasons why I started these Lunch and Learn is because oftentimes when you think about emotional intelligence, it seems like this amorphous topic, right? What is emotional intelligence? But when we have these conversations on the Lunch and Learn, regardless of what the topic is, we keep coming back to emotional intelligence. We keep coming back to self-awareness, which is at the heart of recognizing whether I am in that space of balance, right? And that's so critical. Ayoti, your thoughts on the same question. GiveToGain is the ideal. Why are we so out of balance? And as you think about that, Ayoti, as you answer, there was a comment that came through. So I think Ruth here says, I'm a Gen Z here, and I agree. She was agreeing with Michelle's much earlier point about working with a leader who has the capability of understanding GiveToGain is crucial. And you also spoke about this, Ayoti. But she's put in brackets, but the reality is that it is hardly actioned. So we know what should be, but it's not. So where is the challenge?
Yeah, so I was just listening to Barnabas and actually asking myself of the younger IoT and the older IoT and what has changed. So, and this reflection is coming from a place where how we have been nurtured as girls, as the girl child. The reality is the way we have been socialized is from a very young age.
Yeah.
I don't know why, and maybe Michelle will tell us in this generation if it happens. I happen to have a son who's older, and so I don't know. But I kind of see the girls are given more responsibility. So we are taught to take in a lot more. And I don't know whether we look like we could be trusted. I really can't tell, and maybe Barnabas will tell us from a man's point of view why the girl child gets more responsibility. And so we then automatically start to nurture even our own siblings. If you look at a family setting where the girl is the second born and the firstborn is the son, chances are when the parent is leaving, we were laughing the other day with some friends, and they were like, the house keys will always be entrusted to the girl. Why? Because we are supposed to be nurturers, we are supposed to be the ones who care, we are the ones who should be selfless, we are the ones who should be taking care of the home. And so kind of there is that socialization. Now, when I just want to kind of touch a little bit on scripture, and maybe because also I come from a strong Christian background. And how I remember my mom bringing us up, she really hammered the Proverbs 31 chapter for us, especially the girl child. And there was the element of expectation where we were supposed to model strength, model wisdom and purpose and that kind of thing. And so at the end of the day, you kind of find that because of that nature of even just looking at Proverbs 31 and how it has come about, it kind of continues with that socialization of the expectation of the girl child. I know the Beijing thing at some point came and shifted things a little bit, but at the end of the day, it still comes back to we need to be able to create, and now there is all these conversations around gender and everything, where when there was the after post Beijing and everything, and the gender representation and the diversity and inclusivity, looking for the complementarity of thinking on decision making tables, you find yourself, if you are a girl child in the midst of several men, you are trying to work harder to prove yourself, to actually prove that you own that seat on that boardroom table for one reason or another, and unconsciously so. So that unconscious bias has kind of dispositioned and put the female gender in a place where they're kind of fighting for their space, constantly fighting for their space. And the reality is that's why they overgive, they overcompensate because of how we have been socialized, because of what even biblically it has been indicated. And so this has actually formed a pattern which we need to be able to deliberately and be intentional about repositioning ourselves. Now, you start to find that where there's also an element of the worth, of the identity, of where you feel uncomfortable. And a typical example is where, let me just, this is a very basic example. You're seated in a boardroom, there are maybe 2-3 women amongst another 4-5 men. And so it's a boardroom table of 8, senior leadership, or it's a board. And water pours on the table, a glass, somebody tips over the glass and water pours. Automatically, who is the first person to stand up and react in that setting? Automatically.
The women.
Yes. Who asked you? Right. Because you have...
In myself, I ought to jump to action. Yes.
Yes. We have equal space on that table. But at the end of the day, there is just this thing. There is this, and that's what I call unconscious bias, which has basically kind of pushed it to a space where if Michelle, and also trying to be very excited about her workspace and everything, you'll find herself overextending herself because I'm a young talent. I have gotten a board position. I'm in the C-suite and amongst all these men in this room. And so I'm going to work extra to try and prove that I deserve this place. So then imposter syndrome starts to check in as well. And so the reality is we have to constantly, as the female talent, remind ourselves that we actually have earned that space, rightfully so, and we are there. And the last one I'm just going to mention is there has been a very wrong narrative that has been propelled in the corridors, especially amongst the corporate, where women who get positions of power, they say they did not get them the right way. And I don't know why. And so the unfortunate space is, who has sponsored her to be in that space? Or who does she know? Who is her godfather? Who is she having a relationship with? So that narrative has sort of made women to start to feel that they do not own those spaces, they do not belong there, and yet it's equal representation. And even I can tell you, I'm one of the people who don't believe in this gender diversity and pushing to say 30% representation. It's supposed to be the best job for the best person. Unfortunately, because now the previous conversations have been happening, is now they've had to provide those quotas. For me, providing those quotas, it kind of feels like you have been given the position because you're a woman, just to be able to ensure that we have diversity of talent, which is not right. But it's unfortunate, but it's the world we live in. But I think we need to be careful to realize that you own the space, you have earned the space, and so it should be balanced in terms of how we also take care of ourselves and not let the unconscious bias and imposter syndrome check creep in.
I love that. I love that. And I love that. And I think on your last point, the point you were making about those rumors that circulate, that clearly, she must have known someone or she has a relationship with someone for her to have this spot. I think that's then when this need to constantly prove yourself checks in, because you feel as though you need to prove that, no, I actually genuinely earned this spot. And I think that becomes a challenge. And so I really love this conversation we're having, because we're talking about having the self-awareness to tune in to those underlying biases, underlying, identity crises, underlying socialization, whatever it is that's going on for us. And I'm going to come to you, Michelle, and I like the way Ayoti put it, because I think we'd be interested to hear your perspective, whether there still is that feeling of, being the woman and having been raised in a certain way and having socialized in a certain way. But before I do that, to those who are online, we'd love to hear from you. On a scale of 1 to 10, how good are you at receiving support? 1 is you struggle to ask, 10 is you're a pro. Just type a number, whether you're on YouTube or LinkedIn, we'd love to hear from you. How good are you at receiving support? If it's a 1, that means you struggle. And if it's a 10, you're a pro. Michelle, love to hear your perspective on the same thing. Why is it that whereas we know that GiveToGain is what should be happening, it isn't?
I think first of all, Arati has dropped so many gems. I was like, I don't think my brothers were ever asked, can you take care of Michelle? Make sure she's like in the house when I'm thinking about it. And I think that socialization still exists. And there's something a manager once asked me, like, how do you like being recognized? How do you like being acknowledged? And I was completely quiet. I didn't know how to, I didn't know, like, what do you mean? How do I like being recognized? Should I actually want my achievements to be acknowledged? And if you think about how we're socialized, we're just expected to take care of the household. We're just expected to take care of the family. We're just expected, and we don't necessarily ever hear a form of acknowledgement. And we just wait and wait and wait and think that, okay, maybe eventually they'll acknowledge me. And I think it's coming to the reality, and I'm going to put it more as an early career person, is like understanding no one else is going to advocate for what you want. When you think about school, I do really well in a class, I research, I work hard, I get an A. But in the workforce, that's not the reality. You could work as hard as you can. You could be in all the projects that actually weren't what the business was focusing on, and no one is going to promote you. And I think it's about also being very comfortable in saying, this is what I want. I want to get a promotion. So what projects can I give myself into that actually work to that? If you keep thinking, oh, if I just put a bit more effort here and they'll finally realize how amazing I am, you're going to keep waiting for forever, because no one else is actually thinking about how do I help this other person if they're not even aware of what is happening. So I think sometimes we do a lot of giving, and I'd like to say almost like making assumptions in the background that someone else will act this way. So I just keep pouring and pouring and pouring, and not realizing no one else is they actually first of all don't know what I want. They don't know that maybe I want to be on this big project or I want to do something else. And second of all, maybe they have other priorities. So when we get so comfortable not wanting to kind of advocate for what we want and not wanting to be the center of attention and say like, yes, I need this or I want this, I think that's what happens, and our needs just become like ignored. So yeah.
Fantastic. I can see some numbers coming in. We've got a number of people who said they're on 1, which means they really struggle to ask. And then we've got those who are 5, 6. Great to have you here, Daniel. Great to have you here. Natalia, hey, good to have you here. Susan, it's nice to have you here. Wildest Dreams, thank you for being an ever supporter. It's good to have you here as well once again. I'd love to hear from you as panelists. Where do you place yourself? Michelle, let me start with you. Where are you on this being able to, really find that balance of asking for what you want? And I from what you've said, it sounds like this is a journey you've been on, and a journey that you've recognized how important this is. Where would you rate yourself currently?
I would say I'm a 5, but emerging to a 6, I think.
I like that.
Yeah,
I like that.
Almost in the horizon, the journey's
I love that. I love that. Barnabas, where would you place yourself?
I think I'm in a 6 or 7. But again, that's just from learning from experience. If my younger self will be, I experienced burnout, and that was the wake up call for me to learn to realize that I need others in my life. Yeah. So I think I'm on 6, maybe moving to 7. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Ayoti, where would you place yourself?
I'm trying to take an average.
Hmm.
My personal life and my professional life are very different.
Okay. Okay.
So in my personal life, I score higher. I'm
Okay.
actually probably an 8. I have learned how to
Okay.
work through others because I have a trust circle
Right.
that who have known me over time. And
Right.
so even before I ask for the help, they come and take over, right?
Mm.
And I'm transitioning that same space at my work life. My work life, I'm probably a 6. I'm
Okay.
probably a 6. Yeah, but my personal
Yeah.
life is,
Yeah.
so I'm
It's
actually
higher.
trying to emulate the same. Yeah.
Ah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
interesting for me. I think it's the reverse. I think in my personal life, and
Yeah.
especially with my family, when I'm talking my family, I think
Yeah.
I'm definitely I'm lower than I am in my professional life. I definitely think I'm around the 6, and that's because of work that I have done to get to the 6. I think previously my natural instinct is just do it and get it done, and I'm one of those who go 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 and not stop to think about the impact on me. And so I think my EQ journey has helped me to shift from probably the 2s, 3s to the 6s. But interestingly, for me, IoT, I am more, I would say that probably there's a difference of 1 or 2 between professionally and personally. And one of the things I've been reflecting on a lot more, and especially even with my children, is just thinking around how I need to ask for support, or I'm really learning how to say no, because that's part of asking for support, right? That's part of asking for what you need,
Yeah.
is being able to say no. I struggle to say no, especially to my kids. And that's something I've had to practice a lot more. I find myself rearranging my schedule because one says, "Oh, mom, I need to do this. Can you take me here?" And I'm like, "Okay," I'm rearranging my schedule to make sure I do it. And
Yeah.
then I realize I'm completely out of sync for the things that I needed to do. And I'm learning to actually say, you know what? No, today I can't. Can we try tomorrow? And that's something that I'm learning to do now. So I think I'm definitely stronger from a professional perspective. Thank you to those who are online and sharing. It's good to see you. It's good to have your comments coming through. If you do have any questions for the panel, please can you share? Just type whether you're on LinkedIn or I was about to say WhatsApp, whether you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, just share your questions. So, guys, let's get practical, right? Because we really believe in having conversations that have a practical end. So, we've talked about what this GiveToGain is, this idea of what we're looking for, what healthy reciprocity is, and we've talked about why it's often not happening. So, let's talk about what we can do about it. All right. So, Michelle, let me start with you. For someone early in their career, what simple ways can they start receiving more confidently? Whether it's asking for feedback, asking for help, asking for opportunities. You talked about this idea of wanting to be on a particular project, asking for the promotion without feeling as though they haven't earned it yet. What are some simple strategies that you would share?
This is interesting. I would say if you are someone who is striving for the next big thing, is striving for that promotion, start early. Make your needs known early. So rather than do this thing where you go work like a donkey, take everything up, and then come and be like, okay, please give me a promotion. Actually sit down with your managers or sit down with those leaders in your lives, your mentors, and tell them, I want to get a promotion. I want to be in the next stage. What are the steps I need to take? You're being very vulnerable. They'll actually tell you what you need to start receiving. You're able to now start sense checking it, right? So don't go on the journey of giving before you've actually established what you want to gain in the process. That's what I would say. And it takes vulnerability, it takes hopefully being with leaders who are able to hear you out, but also being comfortable if you know you're in a space where you've tried, no one is hearing you out, being comfortable walking away and trusting in your work and trusting
Mm.
in your output and trusting in who you are as a professional that you will find better.
Wow, I love that. Start with the end in
Wow.
mind. I think that's really powerful, right? Start with the end in
Mhm.
mind. Start by asking. Because you're so right, Michelle, because you could extend yourself on XYZ, and those XYZ aren't actually what give you the visibility you need for idea, this idea that you must start with the end in mind. Begin by asking, this is what I'd like. What are some of the things I need to do? It also means, Michelle, you talked about being vulnerable. It also means that we must be open then to feedback, because perhaps some of the things you need to do aren't so much about being on a project. It's about the things you need to change in yourself, right? Maybe sometimes the feedback is, well, I've noticed this, or I've noticed that, and it may be things that are not so comfortable. So I think it's also being courageous enough to receive the feedback that comes. Thank you very much for that, Michelle. I really like that. Ayoti, talking from a leadership perspective, how can leaders create a culture where reciprocity is encouraged? And so individuals are not just expected to give. And what can we do as organizations?
First, before I come to that question, Mucha, I just want to, my big takeout from what Michelle has said is more than the vulnerability is you need to be courageous, you need to be bold. You need to actually watch out for yourself. And it doesn't mean you're being selfless. It just means you are charting your own path. Because, I've always said time and time again, your career is in your hands. Your career is not in your line manager's hands, because if you rely on your line manager to chart your path, if your line manager leaves, then what happens? Do they leave with your path? So you have to chart your own path. So I like that very much, Michelle, and thank you for that reflection. So in terms of practicality at the workplace, and one of the things that I was thinking through as you're asking this question is, it starts really, and just speaking on that vulnerability word that Michelle has said over and over again, leaders have to be vulnerable. Leaders have to show that they are human. They have to show that they've got feelings too. That, it gets very lonely at the top, right? And they keep saying that over and over again. And so at the end of the day, leaders have to be able to model that they also want to receive. They also want to gain from this relationship. So they're not always giving, they're also asking. And that's why even when you talked about the element of feedback, I remember one time, I'm trying to remember which organization, I think in my previous organization, when I was speaking to the colleagues about how we transition from feedback to feed forward, right? The element of not looking at the back, but looking futuristically. So you need to feed forward. So what does that mean? Even as a leader, as you are giving me feed forward, you're actually telling me this is what you have observed. This is what you would like to see, because this is the impact it has on you as an individual. So the ability to give upward feed forward is very important. And so leaders also have to then position themselves and demonstrate that when they ask for this feed forward, it's really setting it as a strength and not a weakness. It doesn't mean because I'm asking you to actually speak into my life that I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm losing credibility. I value your opinion, so that we can be able to engage and have this relationship become in sync. The other thing also organizations need to do is really to embed this reciprocity, is really to be able to redesign some of the systems. And one of the ones that I am a big advocate for talent management, a super big advocate of talent management. And so one of the things that we need to reposition ourselves is to actually position voice and contribution at the same level. Now, I'm just going to break it down for a minute here and explain what I mean by that. Often at times we look at contribution as what people have done, the KPIs that they have set, the results that they have delivered, the targets they have achieved, the outcomes that have come forth. But what we forget is the voice. And the voice reflects how individuals shape the systems through ideas, collaboration, basically the how part, the influence part. And that is, you can see I'm getting so excited and I'm getting this is the one part that is forgotten often at times, right? And so when we integrate these two factors, these two dimensions, it's very critical. What starts to happen is you start to see some hidden talent coming to the forefront. There are people who are silently strong, and I learned this word from one of my bosses, that there are people who are just silently strong. They don't have to be the loudest person in the room. So if I had Barnabas in my team, it's very easy for Barnabas to be forgotten because he's a flag. It doesn't mean he's not strong. he is silently strong. Being a phlegmatic does not mean that because they are in the room, they are forgotten. So as a leader, do I understand this temperament? So I need to call out Barnabas, and sometimes not in front of the people, because I will not get the best out of him. Just one-on-ones with Barnabas will be able to unlock him. But if you put him in front of a stage, in front of people, this is it. You basically are
Yeah.
what Barnabas can share. And I can see him shaking his head. So I believe I'm almost right. And the last thing I just want to mention is, and this goes to you, Mucha, and what PTS is doing. We talk about EQ all the time, all the time, all the time, all the time. But the reality is, we cannot build psychological safety without equipping the leaders to learn how to read the room. This is a big, huge, overwhelming gap I have seen at the workplace. Close to almost 15 years in my last career, in my last working career, the last 15 years, I have observed this over and over again. And I'm saying the last 15 years simply because of the reality about mental well-being. So what has happened, because leaders are failing to read the room, what is the talent doing? They don't use the word stress anymore. They say, I'm depressed.
Mental health, yeah.
Mental health.
Yeah.
And so as leaders, we panic. And so then we pull back. So there is a counter reaction because we are unable to read what is happening here. The ability to read what is not being said is so critical. And so this is where I'm calling on you, Mucha, as you continue to do the good work you're doing. Can we empower and train leaders to
Yeah.
read what is not being said?
Yeah.
There is silence on a call. Does it mean they have accepted what you're saying? You know, I keep on saying, and I know it's a thing around Kenyans, but I know this is being watched far and wide. But I'll talk about Kenya mostly because
Yeah.
one of the things in terms of a cultural nuance we have, they don't struggle being passive aggressive. They don't
Yeah.
struggle. It's a natural disposition. So if you come in as a leader and you're top down, and yet there's a lot of talent in this country. So if you come in as a leader and you're telling us what to do, there's even a t-shirt I saw the other day, Sisi hatuambiagwi. Like we are not being told. And so when you decide you are doing the telling, they
Yeah.
go mom. And what happens is you struggle. So you're not able to optimize and to be able to unlock what's happening in this team simply because you cannot read what is not being said. So that is what I'm just going to leave with us saying. And in that area, do we have the ability to understand and read what is not being said?
Yeah.
Back to you, Mucha.
Wow. Man, I tell you, I get goosebumps as we're having these conversations. They are so powerful. There's so many insights dropped. I really love what you said there, Ayoti, that we cannot build psychological safety without supporting leaders to be able to read the room. And you know what's interesting, Ayoti, and this goes back to, I want to say it's a Harvard study, an HBR study, but I could be wrong, so don't quote me on the study. But the study was done around self-awareness, and leaders were asked first to rate themselves on how self-aware they thought they were. And so leaders rated themselves high on self-awareness. They were like, yeah, no, I'm very self-aware. And then an assessment was done. And what they found is that leaders are very low on self-awareness. So most of the leaders who rated themselves high on self-awareness were very low. Now, why do I mention this? The ability to read the room begins with reading yourself.
Absolutely.
The ability to read the room begins with reading yourself. So what we're seeing is high levels of leaders who are lacking in self-awareness. And that lack in self-awareness is impacting how little they are able to tune in to what's going on with the team. And I think that's really important. One of the things you said earlier, Ioti, which I'm actually going to take from here. So Team PTS, if you're listening, it was Ioti's idea. This idea of asking people to turn on their cameras, because it's true. We have constant meetings and you're just talking to an avatar. And yes, we laugh, we joke, and I think we have a good energy in our team, but still, these are the ways that you can pick up on how people are doing by just noticing that someone is not expressing themselves the way they usually express themselves. And so I think a lot of work needs to be done. Barnabas, I have not forgotten you. I'd love to hear your insights on this really powerful question. how can we begin to make the shift that is necessary from over giving to more balanced intentional exchange? So, we're still talking about practical tips. We want to make sure that people listening can kind of go away with insights that they can apply.
Thank you so much, and I love what Ayoti was saying. And apart from just the personalities, I've realized this working now intergenerationally. One of the things is I'm Gen X, and Gen X are very passive. Uh, we are passive aggressive. We will not say what we don't like outwardly. When we interact now with the Gen Zs who are more expressive, sometimes that may threaten us. We feel threatened, intimidated in some ways. But one of the things I've learned is how do we again encourage this intergenerational? Because there's something we can get. There's something we can
100%.
gain from Gen
Yeah.
Z that is very, very
Yeah.
important. I have them in my house. Those are my young men in my house. And I've just realized that they are actually interested in gaining from us older folks. In terms of our wisdom, our experience, nothing can replace that. But they also want to be heard. They want to feel seen, heard, and valued as well. And so sometimes when they are speaking up, it's not that they are rude. In my generation, we think that's being rude. It's not. It's not that they're being rude. It's just that they are expressive and they really want to express themselves. And going back to what Ayoti said, I led a team at one point, and what I discovered was this: they were mainly they don't tell you. This is typical Kenyans. They don't tell you really, even when you're asking feedback, they don't give you the feedback that you did as the leader. And so what happens is you tend to think you're doing well, but people are secretly having meetings behind your back and discussing things because they don't feel safe enough to bring them up on the table. And so again, part of that self-awareness among leaders, maybe, Mucha, is as a result of not getting the right feedback. Sometimes we confuse loyalty and giving right feedback. I see it in the political scene when people sing your praise songs, but really nobody is telling the king that he's naked. So they are feedback that we really need from our team, because that just helps me to change as a leader.
Yeah.
Being able to. I remember one time, one of the young people I was leading, I was somewhere and I addressed them. I said, sometimes it's just in how you said something. So I think how I said it rubbed him the wrong way. And so he booked an appointment to come and see me in my office. And when he came and he began to vent and just say what was going on within him, I could see myself. I mean, I started squirming on my chair. I'm at that time, the older nature, I'm thinking, look, I am the boss here, I am the one who is in charge here. What do you think you're saying? But as I calmed myself and really listened to him, I got where he misunderstood me. And as I began to explain myself and made him feel hard, and just really the first thing I did was to just commend him for having the courage out of all that group to come and confront me and say the things that he felt. And I had to go back to the team and just again, maybe I don't know how many more people in the team had it the way he had it. And so I had to come and really explain myself better. But I realized that as we get that feedback from, especially at a leadership position, as we can come down and also receive feedback from those that we are leading, it can help us improve ourselves, and know how to give better. But that's also how we gain from those that we are leading, because so often it looks like the leadership is supposed to give, and there's nothing they can gain from those that they are leading. And I think there's a lot that we can gain from those that we are leading, as we receive their input, as we receive their feedback, as we pull them along to listen to them as well. And one of the things also is maybe to changing our conversation now at the program that we run as Connecting at Work, which is huge on psychological safety, is one of the things of seeing how do we break this talking top-down structure into a lateral conversation. So when you talk about dialogue, we're talking about a lateral conversation, not a vertical conversation, where we are talking as equals, where I can hear you and you can be able to hear me, and I can give you opportunity to voice what you're saying, and me hearing you, I know IoT has been huge on reading the room. So one thing is reading the room, because the facial expressions are very, very important. But also, really, 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 I think one of the best gifts we can give as leaders, but even in organization, the best gift we can give each other is really listening to each other.
Listening.
Because so often there's a lot that is said, and if we just move by quickly, we can miss what was behind what was being said. So can we pause sometimes and really, really want to allow? I know they say this, that curiosity killed the cat, but I know that curiosity has saved many relationships and can improve the relationship. Just be curious enough. Yeah, when somebody's acting up, when somebody's acting in a way that sometimes you wonder why they're acting the way they're acting, why not, instead of objecting to that, just be a little bit more curious to find out what is really going on behind that. Why would you think that way? Even in brainstorming session in teams, because going back to what I already talked about, some people being silent, maybe it's because they voice something and everybody, just rubbish what they think. And from there, we don't realize this, but inwardly we say never again, and so we keep quiet. But what about being curious enough and asking, why would you think that way? And just get the reasoning behind their thinking that can add value even to the team, that can help you understand why they will think the way they are thinking. And so it's just being curious enough to be able to really get to understand those that we are working with. I think that, to me, listening is one of the biggest gifts we can give. But also being listened to is a gain that we also receive in exchange.
Yeah. Oh my, wow. Thank you guys so much for being so practical. You said many things, but I just want to pick on one thing from each of you that really, for me, is what I took away. And I'll invite my audience to share with, in the comments shortly what your biggest takeaway has been. Not just from this question, but in general. But I'm speaking specifically to this question. Michelle, I liked what you said, and I'm paraphrasing it in my own words. Start with the end in mind. So express the outcome you're working towards. So if it's a promotion, say to your manager, hey, I'd like to be promoted in the next 2 whatever years, and then ask for feedback on what steps you need to take. I think that's so important, so that we're focusing our attention on what really matters. So I love that. Ayoti, I love what you said around psychological safety. We cannot build psychological safety without supporting leaders to be able to read the room. I think that is such a powerful statement, this idea that this is something we as leaders must invest in, reading the room, paying keen attention. And I think it goes very well with what you've said, Barnabas. You said they say curiosity killed the cat, but curiosity has actually saved many relationships. I think this idea of being curious, of listening, why? That's an interesting perspective. Expand more. Help me to understand, just wanting to know. That is coupled with your ability to kind of pay attention to the nuances that shift, I think is gold for us as leaders. So what was your biggest aha moment today? Please do share with us in the comments, whether you're on YouTube or you are on LinkedIn. We'd love to hear from you. What was your biggest aha moment today? I'm always amazed at how quickly the time goes. Time has flown by as we've been having this discussion. I want to talk about something really important, because we've had this conversation about practical tips, but I want to ask you, and I'm going to ask this to all of you. I want to ask, how do I get that courage? How do I regulate the discomfort? Because it may not be comfortable to do. So what are some of the ways that have helped you to do those things that are uncomfortable, to, in your case, Michelle, say, hey, I do need help. In your case, IoT, to be able to say, okay, breaks, because I can't keep just doing, right? And in your case, Barnabas, you talked about the fact that your personality is one way, you struggle to say no. So how do you build that muscle? Because now we know the practical steps we should take, but how do I build that muscle? How can EQ help me to build that muscle? Michelle, let me start with you. And then this is a question I'd like for each of you to share. And then I can't believe it, we're already almost at our parting shot. Then we'll come to our parting shot. So as they are sharing, remember in the comments, whether you're on LinkedIn or YouTube, please tell us what's been your biggest aha from the conversation. Michelle, over to you.
Oof, how to get comfortable with doing the uncomfortable things. There's this trend or quote that goes on social media, which is like, it's okay to be cringe, which to young people is like, it's okay to be embarrassing. It's okay to do those things that you're like, oh, I hate this. And almost exposing yourself, like shock therapy and exposing yourself to more situations. Because um, I don't know what happens in life. Like when you start off as a child, you're this confident person, like, I can do it. I want to be president. I want to be a doctor. And then somehow when we become young adults, we start to doubt ourselves and we slowly have to rebuild that confidence and that self of like belief. And it's almost showing to yourself and your mind and your body that go ask and you'll see that, oh, I'm actually not going to die from this situation. Like I'm not going to lose my job. So getting more and more comfortable in exposing yourself to those situations where you are asking for help, and not only are you getting comfortable but reflecting on the outcome. So 2 years into my career and I think about the person I was when I was starting, and now I constantly take myself back and it's like, oh, remember that time that you did this and this was the result. You've done it once, so you can do it again, and just getting that
You can do
confidence,
it again.
and you keep on doing it, and slowly, it doesn't happen all at once, but take those small steps.
That. Mm. I love that. I love that last point that you just made there. Michelle, this idea of yourself that you've done it before, reminding yourself that you've done it before, and if you've done it before, you can do it. Powerful. Because and sometimes you have to kind of pause that voice in your head, easy, right? and remind that voice that I've done it before, I can do it again. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that.
And maybe
Barnabas?
to add, I would say,
Yes, please.
Okay.
Go ahead,
add,
Michelle.
if you're
Go ahead,
starting off in
Michelle.
your
Carry
career,
on. Sorry.
have a career folder or a career drive and keep all those positive affirmations that come from work, from either a teammate, your manager, from all your jobs. And trust me, whenever you're feeling like I'm doubting that I should do this, go back and look at that career folder that you've like accumulated over the years.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much, Michelle. Barnabas, for you?
Yeah, I think we cannot emphasize the importance of courage. I'm a public speaker, but each time I stand to speak, there's fear. There's a lot of fear, but courage is simply overcoming the fear that is in you. And each time you do it, the more you do it, the stronger you become. That's how you exercise that muscle.
Yeah.
As I said, I'm a flag. So saying no, the first time I was able to say no, I felt bad, but but at the same time, I felt yes. So it's both emotions. Yeah, there was a bad because I said no to the person, but inwardly I said yes because I felt so liberated. And so begin with small steps. We talk about the low-hanging fruits. So don't go for the big one. If you're seeking feedback, just try just do a little email and say, how is that email? That feedback, starting small and building up slowly, gives you the confidence and the courage. And as you do so, you're building the muscle, and before long, you will find that it's now easier. It's easier done as you've practiced and gathered the courage to keep doing it.
Yeah. I love the way you emphasize that it gets easier, because it doesn't necessarily get easy. It's just easier, right? It's always going to take some courage. Ayoti?
Yeah, I think for me, over time, I have learned to manage my expectations, and I've come to realize it's a saying I used to use a lot. And I used to say to people, you cannot give your neighbor poison and you cannot give your neighbor poison. I mean, eat poison and expect your neighbor to die, something like that. Like you feed yourself with all this negative energy and expect somebody else to be affected. So when we're looking at, there's a circle of control, which is really smaller, and then there's a circle of influence, the circle of concern. So over time, I have learned that I manage my expectations by really working at what is within my control, that which I can manage directly. That which I can influence is basically the outcome of, if I ask, I want to be promoted and I'm not being promoted, I can only influence that decision by the things that I do, but I cannot force it on somebody. So I manage my expectations. And I love what Michelle said. go back to my folder and remind myself of who I am. What is my personal brand is my personal brand. My personal brand is not defined by the eyes of the person who says yes or no, right? So I know where my true north lies, and my true north does not lie on a human being saying yes or no to me. So I focus on that circle of control and keep widening it little by little, because that is which I have control over what I
Yeah.
receive when I receive the no. And sometimes in life, you will receive like even 4, 5, 6, 7 no's before the yes comes. It doesn't mean I give up. So that means also building the muscle of resilience. And so when you
Yeah.
build this muscle of resilience, then you're never shy to ask. Because I asked today and I received a no, I need also to go back and ask, okay, what is my lesson this season, God? I always have this question I like to ask God. What is my lesson this season? Okay, there is a no for a reason. What are you
Yeah.
saving me? Or
Yeah.
what is it that I need to focus on? Or am I ready, but just not ready here, but ready elsewhere? You see? So there are all these
Yeah.
questions that you can ask and actually then can get to realize it doesn't mean because you received a no, it basically shapes or defines who you are. So managing
Yeah.
expectations.
I
Yeah.
love it. I love it, IoT. So I think what I'm hearing from you, and my biggest takeaway there is, then I need to do the work of knowing who I am, because it's only when I'm grounded in knowing who I am that I am able to look at that no and think, okay, it's a no. It's not a no to me personally. It's not a no that defines who I am. It's just a no to this thing I've asked for. And I think that work that we do, that inside work, is what's critical. And that brings us back again to emotional intelligence, right? I always tell people that emotional intelligence is not another skill that we need to add to the plate of skills that we need to thrive as leaders and as individuals in teams. Emotional intelligence is the plate upon which everything else resides. It's everything else is rooted in emotional intelligence, and that's why it's so important to us as an organization. Wow. Okay. Thank you to those who shared online what your biggest aha is. Edwin, shout out to you. Edwin loved that comment you made earlier, Barnabas, that a relationship needs to breathe. He says it's a simple yet powerful way to understand reciprocity. Faith, hello, back to you. Please share with us what your biggest takeaway is. As I come to my panel and ask for your parting shots, I cannot believe that time is gone. So let me ask for your parting shots. I do want to ask my audience one last question. We love asking you questions. Well, not last question, but I do want to ask you another question. Let me put it that way. Can you give us some feedback on how valuable this conversation has been to you? On a scale of 1 to 5, how valuable has today's content been for you, where 5 is extremely valuable and 1 very little or no value? Please just type 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, whichever one works for you, in the comments as I ask my panelists to give their parting shot. Ayoti, let's start with you. In the last round, you were the last. What is your parting shot as we wind up our conversation?
I think my parting shot is really a question that I'm leaving myself with, and with any other leader, any person who's going to be watching this or interacting with this material, is: do we have the right systems? Do we have the right culture? Do we have the right leadership behaviors really that enable reciprocity, or are we quietly rewarding over giving? Because I think for me,
Mm,
giving and not refreshing does not quite help, because it really takes away. And so we need to refresh ourselves, and so we need to also receive, and not receiving from a point of gaining from an individual perspective, and also just leaning heavily on what I hear a lot of leaders saying, that they are selfless leaders. And I'm saying, okay, fine. How are you refreshing yourself so that you can
mm,
turn to give? Thank you.
mm. I love that. I love that. And I think that's such an important point you've made there as your parting shot, Ayoti, because the truth is, as leaders, what we reward is what we get more of. So are we truly rewarding this concept of reciprocity, or are we rewarding overgiving? And that's for ourselves as well. I love that. Barnabas, your parting shot.
My parting shot is this: in relationships, be it at work, be it at a personal level, has to be a two-way street where there's giving and there's gaining, there's receiving. And when there is just giving alone, we tend to get burnt out, we get tired, we get bitter, we start complaining, and even our giving that is not helpful. But on the other hand, we then need to also gain. Sometimes the way we just refresh ourselves is by what we are receiving. So it's both ways: giving, we gain, and we also give, and we give, and we gain. But again, the motivation shouldn't be that we will only give when we have to gain. So it's not transactional. It's not getting back, but it's just a healthy relationship where it's automatically happening in the ecosystem. And so we have to create systems where we are both there's both the giving and the receiving, and not one or the other.
I love that. I love that. One of the things you actually said earlier that I will not forget, Barnabas, you said that if there's only giving, it's not a relationship. It's not a relationship. It's something else, but it's not a relationship. Edwin, thank you very much for voting, and Wildest Dreams as well. Thank you for voting. Please do tell us on a scale of 1 to 5, how valuable was the content to you today? Just type a number in the comments, whether you're on YouTube or you are on LinkedIn. And if you watch this later, please do the same and just let us know. Michelle, your parting shot.
I will say I'm going to kind of jump on the you cannot give from an empty cup, but at the same time, you need to know what you want in your cup. And you need to be comfortable telling people, no, I want apple juice. Maybe I actually want orange juice. You know, being very comfortable in saying that and advocating that way those two can work together. But yeah, that's all.
I love it. I love it. I love it. So this idea that you cannot operate from an empty cup, but that cup needs to be filled with what you actually need, not just a full cup. Because I think often when we hear that, we just think a full cup, right? But a full cup can be full of things you don't actually need. Woo! So we need to learn to be able to say, no, thanks. No apple juice for me. I'm going to wait for the pineapple and mint. I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. The comments in the chat are 4s and 5s, which means everyone's saying they've really found this conversation valuable. I am amazed every single time that we have this lunch and learn that I take away value myself. So thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Ayoti. Thank you, Barnabas, for your participation in today's lunch and learn. You really have been truly inspiring, and I think you've given us a lot of food for thought. Ayoti, I'm actually taking that challenge that you raised around supporting leaders to read the room and think about how we can incorporate that into the offerings that we have, because I think that is such an important conversation that needs to be had, because truly it is the case where leaders are failing to see what's right before them because they're not able to read between the lines. So thank you very much. As we close, this conversation reminds us that GiveToGain is not about constant output. It's about intentional balanced exchange. And through the lens of emotional intelligence, we've explored with my amazing panel how overgiving, difficulty receiving, and unspoken expectations can quietly erode well-being, relationships, and effectiveness at work. So let me say goodbye to my panel as we wind up. And I want to share with you a few things that we have going on at PTS that you can plug into. So thank you very much, Ayoti. Thank you very much, Barnabas. And thank you very much, Michelle. When we call on you again, please say yes so you can come and share this space with us because we've really enjoyed your insights. Thank you. So thank you very much. So as we wind up the conversation today, I want to ask you again, please do take a moment to give us feedback. We love hearing from you. And we're not just asking for the 5s. We're okay if it wasn't a 5. It helps us to know what we can do better. So please do, on a scale of 1 to 5, how valuable was the content to you? 5 being extremely valuable and 1 being little or no value. So please do keep the votes coming and do keep telling us what your biggest takeaway was. We love seeing that. Faith, I see your biggest takeaway was know what you want. Yes, be able to say no to the apple juice and ask for the juice that you want. And if you'd like us to have a conversation on a particular topic, feel free to share that in the comments as well. We'd love to hear from you. Our role here is to help you understand how EQ underpins everything. And so we know that most of the things that we navigate as people in work and as leaders are built on EQ. So one last thing before I wrap up. Coming up in May is our annual EQ for Africa conference. I am so excited. This year we are having a whole day event. So please do follow us on our socials, visit our website for more information. It is on Friday, the 22nd of May, and we're going to be talking about how to make mental health simple. It's going to be a full day with amazing insights. We are going to have our usual keynote. We're going to have panel discussions. We're going to have stories of resilience, people sharing their stories of how they have navigated mental health challenges. And we're going to have more time for our workshops. Every year we have a workshop, one for HR professionals, and we're including mental health champions in that one this year, and then a workshop for employees and a workshop for entrepreneurs. So please do check us out and find more information about the conference. We would love to see you there. Wrapping up, reciprocity, had to say it slowly there, needs to be practiced with awareness through clear boundaries, openness to support, and mutual investment. And this will strengthen trust, unlock potential, and create more sustainable impact. Ultimately, thriving individuals and workplaces are not built on one-sided effort, but on environments where giving and receiving work together to support shared growth. Thank you all for joining this 53rd episode of the EQ Lunch and Learn. We appreciate your presence, your engagement, and your commitment to the session. Don't forget to tell us if there's any topic you'd like us to cover in future sessions. And don't forget to diarize the last Wednesday of every month. We will be back with episode 54 on the last Wednesday of April. Till then, goodbye. Thank you very much for your time and your engagement. It has been great having you here. For more information about the conference, visit www.pts.co.ke/EQ for Africa conference if you would like more information